In the primer for these sentence lessons, I mentioned that the base clause is the nucleus of every sentence. All base clauses are made up of the same basic components you should already know: a subject and a predicate. Everything that we do as writers when we build sentences comes back to this basic construction, which we must build around. Let's forego any messing about and examine a sentence to get us started. After many days, the Pequod approached the equator, where the weather was perpetually warm and perfect for sleeping. There's a simple sentence in there. Did you catch it? After many days, the Pequod approached the equator, where the weather was perpetually warm and perfect for sleeping. The simple sentence in there was the Pequod approached the equator. Everything else in this sentence modifies the main proposition that the Pequod approached the equator. The introductory phrase, after many days, tells the reader when. The subordinate clause, where the weather was perpetually warm and perfect for sleeping, modifies equator, telling the reader something additional about the weather there. The base clause is the basic unit we'll be working with, and even though the number of possible sentences you can form is infinite, the ways that you can extend a sentence beyond the base clause is limited to a few easy, manageable constructions. But before we get to the ways writers can grow sentences beyond their base clauses, we're going to explore a few ways writers expand the base clauses themselves. That's this first lesson, and I'm going to strive to keep it from turning completely into a grammar lesson. So here goes. Here are a few basic sentence kernels. Bobby ran. The candy fell. Celia likes hamburgers. The first way we can grow these base clauses is by adding modifying words or phrases to them that add specificity and detail. Bobby ran across the field. The candy fell into the trash can. Celia likes hamburgers better than steak. And you can add modifiers that modify any of the main elements in the base clause. For instance, Bobby the bobsledder ran. The peppermint candy fell. Celia likes hamburgers. Or you could add modifiers to all of the elements of the base clause, like so. Bobby the bobsledder ran across the field. The peppermint candy fell into the trash can. Silly Celia likes hamburgers better than steak. Easy enough, right? Great. The next way we can expand from within the base clause is with a subordinate phrase or clause. And if that grammatical terminology is grating or off-putting, I hope you can appreciate that I'm trying to keep this discussion as simple as possible. You might think of subordinates as specifying phrases or clauses. Its job is to point to a specific element and convey what makes it different. So if I were to give you the sentence, the kids climbed the tree that Jack's grandfather planted, the limiting or specifying information is that Jack's grandfather planted. It lets the reader know exactly which tree the kids climbed, the one Jack's grandfather planted, and not any other tree. Without getting too deep into the grammar weeds here, you can usually recognize subordinate phrases or clauses when you see words like that, which, who, whose, etc. Here's what some subordinate phrases and clauses might look like on those simple sentences we started with. Bobby ran across the field that connects the park with the high school. The peppermint candy that Myra's mother gave her fell into the trash can. Celia likes hamburgers that bleed better than steak that crunches. Sometimes subordinate clauses are set off from the base clause by commas. Bobby, who was very late for class, ran across the field. The candy, which Myra had just taken from her backpack, fell into the trash can. Celia, who gave up on her vegetarian diet last June, likes hamburgers better than steak, which she detests. One of the things we can see from this discussion is that it doesn't take more than a single alteration or two to add a ton of complexity to a very basic sentence. But it's important to remember that no matter how complex the sentence gets, the reader is always looking for the main elements of the base clause to make sense of it. The pith. Everything in the sentence, Celia, who gave up on her vegetarian diet last June, likes hamburgers better than steak, which she detests, comes down to 3 words. Celia likes hamburgers. When a reader reads Celia, they hold their mental focus on her, wondering, what should I know about Celia? Even as the reader takes in the subordinate information about her vegetarian diet, The reader is looking for the verb to tell them what they need to know about Celia until they come to likes hamburgers. Ah, she likes hamburgers. Me too. The rest of the sentence consists of details that clarify that main proposition. Okay, there are a couple more important points about how we can grow a base clause. The first is with an interrupting phrase or clause set off by commas or dashes. This can be done in any number of places or ways. A few examples. Tim's behavior, utterly terrible, was a disgrace to all his colleagues. Ted Williams, best known as Teddy Ballgame back in his day, was both a decorated fighter pilot in World War II and a competitive sport fisherman. The shrieks of the seagulls that night in Brunswick Harbor, as obnoxious a noise as I've ever heard in my life, kept me up late into the night. A word of warning here. Interrupt your sentences with care. Often even professional writers end up crafting confusing sentences because they've interrupted their sentences in ways that make them difficult on their reader. One way to avoid this mistake is to make sure the part of the sentence that comes before the dash or commas flows smoothly into the part that comes after. Then make sure the interrupter makes sense with the phrase or clause that follows. See how the above example looks without its interrupter. Ted Williams, best known as Teddy Ballgame back in his day, was both a decorated fighter pilot in World War II and a competitive sport fisherman. Ted Williams was both a decorated fighter pilot in World War II and a competitive sport fisherman. Notice how the subject before the first dash fits perfectly with the information after the interruption. That's one of the reasons the interrupter doesn't break the flow of the main sentence. Also, notice in the following example how the interrupter flows into the predicate after the second dash because they share related information. It's all about the obnoxious shrieks. The shrieks of the seagulls that night in Brunswick Harbor, as obnoxious a noise as I've ever heard in my life, kept me up late into the night. Interrupters are a good place to remember reader sensitivity. Keep in mind that your reader is trying to connect the information that precedes the interrupter with the information that follows it. Try to make it easy on them. Here's an example of an interrupter that ruins the flow of the sentence and makes life difficult or confusing for the reader. Greg Maddux of the Atlanta Braves, the subject of an excellent Punch Brothers song about the art of pitching titled Movement and Location, won the Cy Young Award several times. Believe it or not, that somewhat clunky example is a grammatical sentence. It's just not a great one because the interrupter is unrelated to the phrase after it, won the Cy Young Award several times, which completes the base clause the sentence begins with. By the time the reader gets to the verb, won, the interrupter may have tricked some readers into thinking that the Punch Brothers song won the Cy Young Award. This, as all baseball fans will know, is impossible as the Cy Young Award is the honor that goes to the best pitcher of the year. The sentence is trying to convey that Greg Maddux won the award several times, but that point may get jumbled up by a confusing interrupter. This can be fixed in one of two ways, by simply not including tangential interrupting information, or it can be fixed by offering the reader some help in remembering when they get to the second dash, like so. Greg Maddux of the Atlanta Braves, the subject of an excellent Punch Brothers song about the art of pitching titled Movement and Location, was a pitcher who won the Cy Young Award several times. It's still not the greatest sentence in the world, but it's far easier for the reader to follow and make sense of. Try to practice reader sensitivity whenever interrupting your base clauses. The last method of lengthening a base clause is by adding an introductory phrase or clause. You'll see these a lot in fiction, as they do an excellent job of setting the stage for the base clause of a sentence. Sometimes they begin with a prepositional phrase. Above the stony arch at the mouth of the pyramid's tunnel, a statue of two great snakes coiled in combat resides. You may have noticed that this long introduction to the base clause does a good job establishing a ground for the image later provided by the base clause. The stony arch gives the reader a ground to visualize and then populate with a figure, the two snakes coiled in combat. Introductory prepositional phrases are excellent tools for this type of image building. In addition to phrases that cue location, introductory phrases are a good way to help your readers orient the action along the timeline of the story. A few hours after Keith came over, he and Sandra were at each other's throats again, all fired up about the missing jewelry. Similarly, phrases and clauses introduced by conjunctions, like because, although, whenever, if, until, etc., these can answer questions like how, why, how often something happens, etc. Because Danny had a few too many beers, he handed the keys to Andre. Or, introductory phrases and clauses can express conditionals. Unless the caterers arrive within the hour, the Mesners are going to have a wedding reception with no food. Sometimes you'll see some of these phrases and clauses as modifiers of the base clause. They don't always come at the beginning. Callie always oversleeps on the 5th of November because her birthday is the day before. I tend to prefer moving one or more of these phrases to the beginning of the sentence because I find it usually adds a touch of clarity, like so. Because her birthday is the day before, Callie always oversleeps on the 5th of November. Or, on the 5th of November, Callie always oversleeps because her birthday is the day before. And there are times when moving a modifying clause to the beginning of a sentence can smooth it out tremendously. Tony spilled coffee all over his suit as soon as we were ready to go and had to change into another suit. Versus, as soon as we were ready to go, Tony spilled coffee all over his suit and had to change into another suit. All these techniques for expanding the base clause leave the writer with an extraordinary level of flexibility when it comes to constructing a sentence. Being sensitive to the reader's task of following your lead means thinking about how complex your base clause is. How far is your subject from your main verb, and what are you asking the reader to process in between? Smooth, flowing prose generally never asks the reader to do too much. We'll get into some of the ways you can help your cause in this regard later in these sentence building lessons. But first, we're going to begin to explore a few ways we can grow our sentences beyond the base clause. This is where it starts to get interesting.